So, in this episode, I'm going to explain why I believe that Lori Vallow is a narcissistic sociopath. Some of the aspects of her personality I'll be looking into are based on the fact that I think she has delusions of grandeur. I think she's devoid of empathy. I think she has zero conscience. I think she's grandiose and self-serving. I don't believe she's insane. I think she knows the difference between right and wrong, but I do think she has some form of mental disturbance. Subscribe and hit the bell for notification of every episode that I upload. So, the fact that I think she's mentally disturbed doesn't prevent her from being able to manipulate people, which I actually think is something that she's very good at. I am pretty certain that Lori Vallow could charm and manipulate a professional mental health evaluator into thinking she's perfectly normal. So I was just watching the interview with her mother and sister, and I realized they've actually bought into Lori's fake facade. You know, the soft-spoken girl next door, caring mother. They believe that's what she is. Anyone with common sense can see that she is not the loving, caring mother that her family has described her to be. So let's start with Colby, her eldest son. For at least 3 months, Colby has been pleading with his mother to produce the children, to let him know that they are safe, to contact him, and Lori Vallow has completely ignored her son. It's as if he doesn't even exist in her grandiose, superficial world. Now, a loving mother would have given her son some reassurance, shown some empathy and compassion. Seeing her son in pain and pleading should have ignited some conscience. And yet for all this time, she has continued to pretend that her son Colby doesn't even exist. Didn't even invite him or any other family member to her wedding. These are not the actions of a loving, caring mother. These are instead the actions of someone who has no empathy, only cares about herself, has no conscience, is cold, callous, and cruel. But if that wasn't enough to convince you that this woman doesn't care about anyone but herself, let's look at some of the signs and symptoms of a narcissistic sociopath, the key factors. So, exploits and manipulates others without guilt or shame. I believe that Lori Vallow exploited and manipulated her brother into getting rid of her husband, to pave the way for her to marry Chad and collect the life insurance. There's no doubt in my mind. But she also manipulates other members of her family. She tells her mother and sister that Charles's family have been making threats against her and the children, which is a total lie. So now I'll move on to my next factor, my next key point, pathological lying. That is the excuse she uses for the disappearance of her children. She lies to everyone about their whereabouts. The reason why she couldn't produce her children is because they have been expired for quite some time. We all now know what happened to those kids, and she knew it all along. If she could have produced her children, she would have done so to keep herself out of jail. This is the next key point, seeking admiration from others. I believe that Lori is and was the mastermind. I believe she wears the trousers in relationships. Let me tell you, Nicole Kessinger has nothing on Lori Vallow. I believe that Lori only cares about herself. I believe she wanted admiration from Chad Daybell. And I believe she's a serial bride because she discards her husbands for the next new source of narcissistic supply. I also believe she married Charles Vallow purely for his money. While having an affair with Chad, Lori took 35,000 grand out of Charles's bank account, leaving him penniless, which just represents how cold, callous, and cruel she is. Eventually, she would have discarded Chad Daybell and moved on to another man. And as soon as the boredom with her next admirer started to kick in, she would have simply remarried once again. That's my opinion. So when you look at her life, you see she jumps from one husband to the next, been married 5 times. while Chad Daybell was married to one woman for decades. Charles Vallow was simply a paycheck, an income stream for Lori Vallow. Now, when she was younger, you see she took part in a beauty contest when she was 30, I think she was. That doesn't necessarily make anyone a narcissistic sociopath, but I do think when you look at this in context, along with the other factors, I surmise that she probably knew how to use her looks and her superficial charm for self-gaining purposes. I think she's someone with a well-manicured exterior, but underneath she's empty and devoid. There isn't any real substance there. So now, in terms of guilt, what do I think? I think she's 100% guilty. I think she discarded her husband and her children with the help of her brother and Chad because she had grandiose delusions and she wanted to live this fantasy world with her new form of narcissistic supply. Every man she became involved with was a new source of narcissistic supply for her. And when she got bored, she simply moved on and remarried. Now, I hope she's not able to use superficial charm and manipulation on the police and authorities. I'm really hoping that she doesn't get away with what she's done, because she has so far gotten away with a lot. Lori Vallow has probably been a sociopath since her early 20s or even before then. You don't just suddenly become a sociopath in your late 40s. However, somehow she was able to maintain the fake facade of normality for many years. Her ability to manipulate with ease was probably aided by her considerable good looks and ability to use superficial charm to her advantage. At the end of her marriage to Charles Vallow, it's quite clear that Lori was gaslighting him. Unfortunately, although he was becoming concerned about her behavior, the fact that she was an attractive woman worked in her favor. The police didn't take Charles seriously. Lori was able to use her charm and good looks to evade, or at least delay punishment or retribution. Lori was pulling all the strings, and Charles was just a pawn in her twisted game. Any form of punishment she will receive has come too late or has been greatly delayed. The consequences have been fatal.